Hello, Merfolk fans. I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. I'm here with a rare treat. I had a match a couple days ago against AEther. It's a deck that I don't see around too much these days, but I love that it exists. It's part of what makes Modern so amazing. Now, I hate playing against AEther. It's one of the most obnoxious decks sort of ever designed, but it just attacks on such a cool axis. You can come at them with sort of more traditional creature decks. You can come at them with lightning bolts, come at them with counter spells. You can come at them with whatever you want. They have so much interaction in the form of sort of hand disruption. And it looks like this deck is actually splashing green for Abrupt Decay for more removal. That they can pretty much take away, if they're a good player, they can take away your best cards, slow you down enough to resolve spells like Wrench Mind, sort of tearing your hand apart, and then drop a couple of Shrieking Afflictions onto the board and just drain you out every turn. So again, while I hate playing against AEther, I kind of love it just because it's so different from, say, Merfolk, that it's just it's so different from Jund, it's so different from Nahiri that it's just so refreshing, I think. So it looks like, let's see, the opponent's on one land here, and it's a tapped land. Can't imagine this is a keep. Looks like I won the die roll. This is an easy keep for me. Let's see if the opponent keeps this or not. So they mulliganed into a Thoughtseize, Smallpox, Ensnaring Bridge Curve, which is pretty gross. Looks like that's probably a keep for them, and they're going to put their second Ensnaring Bridge onto the bottom with their Scry. So off to a good start. I got to keep 7 cards against AEther, which is always good. Against a deck that wants to strip your hand as quickly as possible. Oh, man, there were 3 Ensnaring Bridges on the top of his deck. Looks like the opponent is going to open with that Thoughtseize, looking at my hand. Now, whenever I have a Master of the Pearl Trident and a Master of Waves, it's inevitable that the opponent always tells me to get rid of Master. And then I'm left to ask them, which Master? But he specified, Master of the Pearl Trident. Very good. This guy knows his Merfolk. So I'll go ahead and hide that Master of the Pearl Trident. I'll get one of these Merfolk onto the board. I've got a pretty nice clock here. I might be able to get out ahead of this Ensnaring Bridge, but Smallpox is a pretty vicious magic card. I hide this Lord of Atlantis here. Alright, so the opponent's going to cast this Smallpox. I'm going to lose 1 life, sacrifice a creature, discard a card, and sacrifice a land. Yuck. So let's see what the opponent got rid of. I think he discarded an Ensnaring Bridge. I have to sacrifice a land and a creature. I lost a life, and at this point I'll have to discard a card. I chose to get rid of a land instead of the Master of Waves. It could have gone either way there. But I draw into a Spreading Seas. It's a little tricky here because the opponent has access to Ensnaring Bridge, which can shut me down because I won't be able to attack. I actually have 1 out to Ensnaring Bridge in my main deck with Echoing Truth, so I would eventually be able to draw into an Echoing Truth. But the opponent took himself off of the lands necessary to resolve this Ensnaring Bridge. Not sure if that's correct or not. I think he could have waited to resolve the Smallpox before resolving Ensnaring Bridge. Alright, so I'll just play out Spreading Seas here since cards like Smallpox and Liliana of the Veil require 2 black. I'm going to also draw a card off of Spreading Seas, which, as I mentioned, it's great to have cards in your hand against AEther. So the opponent knows about, let's see, played out this island. I discarded my Wanderwine Hub. He knows about both of my creatures here. Alright, so he's going to make me discard. That's pretty much all he can do at this point with access to 1 black. But with with only 2 mana here, I'm going to get rid of the Master of Waves. It's painful discarding such a good card. But it's probably just too slow anyway right now. I'm going to get AEther Vial on the table. These games against AEther can go really long. And I'm going to be able to get my creatures out a lot faster. Now, Wrench Mind, you can see the power of getting that Spreading Seas onto the table. Wrench Mind would totally blow me out right now. It would get rid of both of my creatures. So excellent that the opponent only has access to 1 black mana, and that he's still just sitting on 2 mana and can't get Ensnaring Bridge onto the table. So I draw my 3rd land, and I'm going to want that at some point. I don't feel that it's necessary. He doesn't have any Racks or Shrieking Afflictions out, so I don't really have to keep my hand stocked right now. I'm going to play out the Lord of Atlantis. The decision there was between... Obviously, the Harbinger is a lower priority, but is it more likely that the opponent is going to Thoughtseize me or do something like Liliana the Veil or Dismember on my Lord of Atlantis? And it just seemed more likely that he was going to Inquisition of Kozilek or Thoughtseize, in which case I'd much rather he takes the Harbinger. The opponent draws another Smallpox, so Spreading Seas paying huge dividends right now. And at this point, the opponent knows none of the cards in my hand anymore. I hit another creature. It's going to allow me to get a clock on the table. I'll play out that Cursecatcher and leave up Harbinger with Aether Vial. See if the opponent can hit a land here. Well, they drew a Rack. That's something. So again, since 8-Rack is not the most popular deck in the world, some of you might not know this spell. It's a 1 mana artifact that says you have to choose an opponent when you come in. Typically, it's played in one-on-one Magic, so it's always just going to be me. At the beginning of my upkeep, the Rack is going to deal X damage to me, where X is 3 minus the number of cards in my hand. So if I have 0 cards in my hand, I lose 3 life on each of my upkeeps, and it can be a pretty fast clock. If I have 1 card in hand, I only lose 2 life. If I have 2 cards in hand, I lose 1 life. If I have 3 cards in hand, I lose no life. So it becomes an incentive to keep cards in hand, but I have a faster clock than the opponent, and so I don't care about the Rack right now. I'm going to put Harbinger out, and now I have 7 power on the board. I lose 3 from the Rack, draw another Lord, and coming pretty strong at this point. So I realize that swinging for 7 right now, I can leave up Lord of Atlantis for Aether Vial and bring him in at the end of the opponent's turn and swing for lethal next turn. I might be able to bait out a Thoughtseize and get him to spend 2 life to get rid of this card, in which case I could just respond and put it out with Aether Vial. Okay, another Ensnaring Bridge. I'm getting a little bit lucky here with the opponent missing lands, but he only has himself to blame since he destroyed his own land with Smallpox earlier in the game. So there we pretty much see 8-Rack folding to itself. I just applied a bit of a clock, and that was it. Game 1, let's go ahead to Game 2 and see how that one went. Okay, my opening hand looks very solid. I should note that I brought in 4 Hurkyl's Recalls and left the Echoing Truth in. The most powerful thing 8-Rack has against creature decks is Ensnaring Bridge, and I want as many answers to that card as possible. If the opponent wants to Thoughtseize away my Echoing Truth, I'm going to have 4 more answers with all those Hurkyl's Recalls. So this is an easy keep. I've got an answer to Ensnaring Bridge. I've got 4 creatures. Just looks excellent. The only thing that can make it better would be Aether Vial. On the opponent's side, 2 Swamps. A little bit short on the mana necessary to cast Liliana Veil, but they'll have a couple of turns to get there. They'll have a turn 1's Raving Crime if they want to go that way. Smallpox on turn 2 or Wrench Mind. Pretty good stuff on their side. I think it's an easy keep for both players. All right, the opponent is going to start with Raven's Crime, and I have to think a little bit about it. I'm going to get rid of the Harbinger of the Tide just because he provides the least utility in this matchup. 8-Rack doesn't tend to play a lot of creatures. Being on only 2 lands, hitting that 3rd land is actually pretty good right there. So the opponent is going to go with Wrench Mind, and I'm going to sacrifice Cursecatcher to counter that. It's possible the opponent there was running out Wrench Mind instead of Smallpox because Smallpox is more valuable, and he knew one of them was going to get countered by Cursecatcher. That actually seems pretty smart to me because Smallpox is probably the better card in this spot. But again, Smallpox is going to take the opponent off of lands, and that can set him back a lot. He learned the hard way last game. So seeing how excellent Spreading Seas was last game, I can't help but get it out there this game. It also draws me into cards, which is one of the most important things against 8-Rack. So the opponent has his 3 lands now, and they'll get Liliana onto the board. At this point, I think Master of Waves is probably the best choice, since I'm pretty far away from having the mana for him. Yeah, so I can resolve these guys right now. Echoing Truth is very important, again, for getting Ensnaring Bridges off the board. The opponent gets rid of this Abrupt Decay since he doesn't have access to green mana. Okay, and I draw right into another Master of Waves, so discarding the other one was definitely the right choice. In this spot with 3 mana, I'm going to make most efficient use and get Reejerey onto the board. Unfortunately, the opponent's going to be able to minus and get rid of that Reejerey. And the opponent hits a Thoughtseize, pretty good. It will be able to get rid of this Echoing Truth if they feel that that's a threat. So here's the Thoughtseize. The opponent finally getting off of 20 life, going down to 18. I haven't been able to start clocking him yet. Now these are all pretty scary cards in this spot. Master of Waves is going to bring 2 elementals with the Spreading Seas on the table and play right around Liliana of the Veil. I can just sacrifice elementals all day. Master of the Pearl Trident, of course, gives me buffs and Island Walk, but Echoing Truth is a versatile answer, and he has to be afraid of this if he wants to try to establish a lock with Ensnaring Bridge. So here's the opponent naming Master. It's going to make me ask which Master. Master of Waves. So there he goes. Okay, and I drew the Mutavault. So probably correct that the opponent took Master of Waves, since I would have been able to resolve him here with two elementals. But I'm going to be able to play out my Island Walk Lord and leave mana up for Echoing Truth. So pass back to the opponent. Let's see what they draw. Overgrown Tomb. So he -2s Liliana again. I have to think if I want to sacrifice my Mutavault or my Master of the Pearl Trident here. Now Mutavault plays around effects pretty nicely. So I think instead, again, having access to 4 Hurkyl's Recalls in my deck, I'm going to Echoing Truth my Master of the Pearl Trident here to save both of my creatures, so I won't have to sacrifice anything to Liliana. So now the opponent knows about all the cards in my hand, and plays out his second Liliana of the Veil, and he's going to make me discard my Master, so tricky stuff. Well, I draw an island, not great, but I'm going to be able to start ticking away at Liliana of the Veil with Mutavault. This is a pattern that I've played against Adrac before, where they try to claw their way into the game with Liliana of the Veil, but they keep +1ing, and I keep hitting them for 2 with Mutavault. So it keeps going down and down and down, one by one each turn. So the opponent discards Thoughtseize to Liliana. I draw another land, but I can just keep swinging with Mutavault. Lily will go down to 1, and if she pluses again next turn, she's going to be off the table when I swing with Mutavault on my next attack step. Well, opponent draws another Wrench Mind. These cards get pretty terrible when my hand is empty. The opponent had everything except, I guess, a rack, right? It's called 8 rack, and they don't have it. So we can see how the deck again can scoop to itself if it doesn't draw its namesake card, either Rack or Shrieking Affliction, to take advantage of my empty hand that they worked so hard to establish. Negate is great in this spot because once I get Liliana off the board, well, first of all, I don't want Mutavault to get hit with a Dismember right now, so Negate would have been able to counter any removal spells. But Liliana's finally gone, and the opponent's starting to draw lands as well. We'll see if he wants to resolve this Smallpox. Looks like he does, but I have the Negate, so the opponent starts resolving the Smallpox, but I think I'm going to actually counter this with Negate. I like having access to the Spreading Seas for that little bit of extra devotion if I draw into a Master of Waves. And, Smallpox is one of the more potent cards, and with mana up and a counterspell in hand, I don't really see a good reason not to use it. So finally, hit a great card. Swing for 3 instead of 2. Get a little bit of a faster clock. Raven's Crime is utter trash. Draw another Merfolk. go ahead, activate Mutavault and swing for 5. The opponent will go down to 10, and I'll get the Cursecatcher out on the table. Ensnaring Bridge is pretty good, so that'll slow me down. The opponent has 1 card in hand and could easily go down to 0 if he wanted to, and all my creatures have 2 power or more. So if you have outs to Ensnaring Bridge, you typically want to play out enough cards to have lethal on board. Currently, I only have 7 between 3, 2, and 2. So I'm going to go ahead and play this this other Island Walk Lord and hope that I draw into one of my Hurkyl's Recalls. With the game not really going anywhere right now, I feel like I'm going to have plenty of time to do that. Well, here's a Shrieking Affliction. That's going to put a bit of a clock on me. This cares if I have 1 or fewer cards in hand. So I take 3 from Shrieking Affliction, draw a Wanderwine Hub, and just put it into play. Now, that might have been a misstep, because with Shrieking Affliction, it's better if I have 2 cards in hand. Not quite sure why I played that Wanderwine Hub out. I mean, I might have been afraid of Liliana making me discard it, but who cares if I discard a land at this point? Better to not be getting clocked by Shrieking Affliction. So here's a Smallpox again. He does get to get my Spreading Seas off the board when he gets rid of his swamp. I'm going to have to lose a life, sacrifice a creature, and sacrifice a land. So there goes that Wanderwine Hub. Short-lived. Another Mutavault is great. I'm going to take 3 from the Shrieking Affliction. Well, Mutavault is great in the sense that it helps ensure that I have lethal on board through any removal that the opponent might have. Spreading Seas, pretty good card. It's going to let me draw more stuff, and that's what I need to be doing at this point. Well, and there's the Hurkyl's Recall. That's what happens when you play 4 of a card. If you get to draw 10 cards in a row, you're probably going to hit one of those eventually. So there's the Hurkyl's Recall. Going to bounce that Ensnaring Bridge, and at this point I have 14 damage, I think, on the board. So after resolving the Spreading Seas and the Hurkyl's Recall, I only had access to 3 mana, so I couldn't activate both Mutavaults. But 1 is enough. I have 3, 3, and 4 for 10 total, and that'll be enough to close out the game. So again, I really love seeing 8-Rack. It's a really, really annoying deck, but it can be very powerful if it gets the right cards. But it can scoop to itself if it gets the wrong cards. If you come prepared for it, I think that we have a pretty good matchup with Merfolk, because we've got our 4 Silvergills, our 4 Spreading Seas, which we saw how much work Spreading Seas can do. I mean, if only for drawing a card, it would be a very strong play in this matchup. But taking them off of black mana is very important, because so many of their spells are very black mana intensive. So we've got 8 card draw spells. We have access most of the time, depending on the build, to 2, 3, or 4 Hurkyl's Recalls. And if you guys play any Echoing Truth, that's yet another effect that can deal with Ensnaring Bridge. I think a lot of 8-Rack players just assume that Ensnaring Bridge is going to be sort of a game-ending answer to aggressive decks. But again, if you come prepared, it's not anything that needs to worry us excessively. So that's the end of the match. Please leave any comments that you have, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time. Thank you again.